I have a master's in linguistics and teaching ESL, and have worked with adults for 40 years. Over half of that has specifically been with immigrant integration in the greater Cincinnati area. This has included ESL, literacy, and civics instruction for the entire range of previous education, including many of the non-literate refugees who came starting in about 2008, um, and helping them through the entire process of getting to the stage of emergent reader and building from there, as well as a civics education. I've also was a community-based liaison for the different agencies I worked for over a decade, and introduced the USCIS field office director at the time to working with the non-literate population in 2009, and have done a fair amount of training the trainers and training volunteers. I also worked as an immigration attorney for many years, focusing on humanitarian cases such as refugee and asylum and domestic violence, and family law and family immigration law and citizenship issues. I worked very specifically for many elderly non-literate refugees, working with their naturalization applications, including medical disability waivers, and have given legal presentations to different groups, including um, presentations on immigration and citizenship for elder law attorneys. Responsibility of citizenship. This includes voting. It is not mandatory, but it is a responsibility to vote and to vote in an informed manner. Jury duty when called upon. And finally, service to the country, military service, or other service when called upon to do so. Benefits of citizenship for individual applicants. Number one is surely the ability to vote. Other benefits include increased ability to sponsor family members and the ability to travel with an American passport. Citizenship also brings certain other benefits from the government. For example, in some cases, SSI, supplemental Social Security income for refugees, certain jobs and scholarship opportunities, etc. But, and this is huge, the process of studying for the test often improves English language skills, literacy, life skills, and employment prospects. The importance of citizenship for the community, and this cannot be overstated. Residents who speak, read, and write the common language of the community, and residents who have knowledge of the civic culture of the land, is invaluable to the country. The process of preparing for citizenship and taking the oath indicates a vesting in and allegiance to the United States of America. The importance of citizenship for immigrant integration. In other words, naturalization is a motivation for immigrant integration, a metric of immigrant integration, and a tool for immigrant integration. Eligibility requirements for naturalization. These can be found at uscis.gov. The following are some of the legal requirements. Must be at least 18 years old, be a permanent resident, also known as green card holder, for at least 5 years, although that may vary if married to a US citizen, it may be 3. Also, refugees' permanent residence is backdated to date of arrival. Must demonstrate continuous permanent residence in the United States for at least 5 years, show physical presence in the United States for 30 months, and that also depends, and show that you have lived for at least 3 months in the state or USCIS district where you apply, and be a person of good moral character. Naturalization, common issues. If any of these seem to apply, consult a lawyer or legal agency. One set involves good moral character. Good moral character is important to get naturalized. It is also a potential for removal, also known as deportation, especially by criminal convictions and fraud. So there is a possibility of, in some cases, being removed. Abandoning permanent residency status, also known as green card, even unknowingly. It's possible that if there are issues here, that an applicant can apply for citizenship and not only not get it, but red flag his case for removal proceedings. So if there are issues here, you should get legal advice. Naturalization, common issues continued. There are some issues around the test of English, and the test of civics. Many less literate immigrants and refugees, or even those with education but a different alphabet, have only a surface understanding of reading and writing in English. That surface knowledge may mask underlying gaps in skill and in knowledge. Learning English, especially reading and writing, can take a long time. The application is very expensive, so you want to be close in terms of your English, including English reading and writing, before you start the application process. Eligibility requirements for naturalization. These can be found at uscis.gov. There are several legal requirements we have gone over. Then there's also the requirements about knowledge. Mentioned briefly, those can be found at the Immigration Nationality Act, 312, and corresponding 8 CFR section 312. Be able to read and write basic English in common use, and to be able to speak basic English. And then to demonstrate an attachment to the principles and ideas of the US Constitution, and to have a basic understanding of US history and government, also known as civics. The naturalization test, the English portions. For the reading test, you must read out loud one of 3 sentences correctly, demonstrate an ability to read in English. And for the writing test, you must write one of 3 sentences, which you will hear dictated correctly, to demonstrate an ability to write in English. They will use a tablet or iPad for this section. Also, it's important to understand that while they will give you lists of vocabulary words which could be used, mostly about American civics, it is very difficult to do this off of sheer memorization unless you also have some of the principles of reading, unless you are able to read, that you understand some phonics, that you understand that you are in fact able to read and write generally in English. Please note also the link to the scoring guidelines. The English is English in ordinary usage, and that means that the reading and writing does not have to be 100% perfect, but it does have to be good communication. It does have to be something that is understandable, and the officers are trained in this. Similarly, for the speaking test, which is literally going over the application, the officers are also supposed to rephrase and continue asking until they have determined either that the applicant has understood the question or does not speak English. The naturalization test, the speaking test. In fact, this surprises some people, but you are tested on your ability to speak in English. That is determined largely by the interview, which is conducted in English. And the interview is going over and updating and clarifying questions on the application for the N400. So what that means is someone may help you fill out the application, but the information must come from you, and you must indicate if someone helped you to fill it out. You are responsible for the contents and being able to talk about it in English. There are questions about your family and background, your good moral character, and your attachment to the Constitution of the United States and to principles of democracy. The civics test. These are questions about America. Let me clarify something that may be confusing. For a short period of time, there had been a revised version called the 2020 version. That was in effect only from December 2020 through March plus of 2021. It is now back to the previous version of the test, often referred to as the 2008 version. And I include a link here, or you can go to Citizenship Resource Center, study for the test, and look for the 2008 version. The 2008 version had 100 questions. The short-term 2020 version had 128 questions. So if you look for any study materials or any rules, etc., make sure that you are referring to 2008 version with 100 questions. With the 2008 version, the USCIS officer will ask you to answer 6 out of 10 questions from their 100 civics questions. All of the questions are asked orally, and the questions cover geography, history, government, and holidays. There are some exceptions to the English and civics requirement for naturalization. They are available on the USCIS website in their policy manual, volume 12, part E. They are very specific, so I invite people to look at that chart and to consult legal counsel in determining if that applies. I would suggest that they are very specific, and so if people say, oh, well, they've got all sorts of exceptions, so I won't have to take these tests because my friend, cousin, neighbor, neighbor's neighbor, whatever, didn't have to, they may have had one of these exceptions that may not apply to you. So it is very specific. It is really worth consulting. Similarly, there is a medical disability waiver of some of the parts of the test, the English and or civics test. Again, it is worth mentioning that this is very specific, so it may or may not apply. The medical disability waiver is discretionary. That means that the USCIS can choose whether or not to accept it. It is not mandatory for them to accept it. It is discretionary. These are the required elements. The form must be written by a medical doctor or clinical psychologist. It must be a formal diagnosis, medical diagnosis, or a psychological diagnosis from the DSM-5. It must clearly state that there is a nexus or connection between the diagnosis and the inability to learn, whether it's reading, writing, speaking, or the civics part. And this is extremely important. Lack of previous formal instruction and or old age in and of themselves do not qualify for a waiver. Again, just because you never had school as a child, just because you have no formal education and now you're older, that does not automatically get you the disability waiver. Also, there are some accommodations such as Braille for the blind and so on. There's something called special consideration and due consideration in asking of the questions. Again, so other people may mention these things, but these are the different possible exceptions. If you think that they apply, please ask a professional. Oath of allegiance and ability to understand the oath. The final requirement for naturalization is formally taking the oath of allegiance. So that is renouncing allegiance to former countries, principalities, etc., and taking an oath of allegiance to the United States, to its Constitution, and to the rule of law. Finally, a note on the filing fees. As of December 1st, 2020, they are not cheap. This is the application fee is $640 plus $85 for the biometrics, for a total of $725. There's a possibility that it could increase. There are fee waivers. They are somewhat limited. They are fee waivers if the person receives a means-tested benefit, or they are at or below 150% at the federal poverty level, or have extreme financial hardship. Processing times. As of December 5th, 2020, they're listing 11.5 to 17 months after filing the application to process the N400 application in the greater Cincinnati area. Of course, note that processing times vary greatly. At some points over the last couple of decades, they have been down to 4 or 5 months. Earlier, it had been 2 years, etc. Right now, they've been this year they've been impacted very much by the COVID-19, budget concerns, and other factors.